Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, my name is Arthur Stanley Katz. I live at 7980 Birchwood Court, Mason, Ohio, 45040 6907. Today's date is October the 15th of 2007. The place of the interview is at 7980 Birchwood Court in Mason. My service number in the U.S. Army was 121-85660, and I served in the U.S. Cavalry branch of the United States Army from November 1942 through November 1945, and when I was honorably discharged. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
All right.
This was your date of birth.
Okay.
Okay. There you go. Okay.
Hi, I was born on March 21, 1923 in Brooklyn, New York. And on the day Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7, 1941, I was approximately 4 months shy of my 19th birthday. I remember very well December 7th, 1941, because I was home alone listening to the New York Philharmonic Orchestra playing a concert on the radio. We had no television then. And the broadcast was interrupted by a rather excited commentator indicating that Pearl Harbor had just been bombed by the Japanese. And I didn't even know at that time where Pearl Harbor was. But obviously that was the beginning on December 7th, 1941 of World War II. And it entered into our living room at that time. I was a student at Brooklyn College in my, I believe my junior year at that point. And I determined to enlist in the service for a number of reasons. One, I recognized the impact, the negative nature of what Hitler and Mussolini and Tojo, if they won, would do to Americans in general and to Jewish people in particular. And being a Jew, I was quite mindful of the consequences. And so, on the 16th of November 1942, although I was the beneficiary of a college student's deferment, which meant I could sit out the war as long as I was in college and doing passing work, I gave up my college deferment and enlisted in the U.S. Cavalry of the U.S. Army on the 16th of November 1942. I was at that point 19 years of age, and on the 28th of November 1945, I was honorably discharged from my military service, which was conducted both in the combat and post-combat phases in the European theater. The experience of being a volunteer had a political consequence to me, which was humorous in a way. At the time of 1942, the Germans had already attacked in 1939 Poland and Russia, and the Russians were getting beat up around the head and shoulders and were anxious to get us to come into the war and open a second front. And so there were a lot of left-wing sympathizers of Russia in college who kept on making these marches and demands that the U.S. enter the war. And they're all college buddies of mine. And I said, hey, let's all go down and enlist and give up our student deferments to show how desirous we are for the United States to enter the war to help our Russian allies. And they all thought that was a great idea. We all agreed to go to down to Brooklyn Borough Hall, where the enlistment center was. And the following morning, I got there at 8 o'clock, standing on the steps of the Borough Hall. Nobody showed. 9 o'clock, Nobody showed. 10 o'clock, nobody showed. I went in and I began the procedure to enlist, which I did. And the next morning, I meet these guys at Brooklyn College. And I said, "Where the heck were you fellas? I just went down there and you didn't show up, and I enlisted." And they said, "You got to be crazy." They used something for profanity, which I won't use here, saying, "Hey, you think we'd be crazy enough to give up our deferments to enlist in the army?" And so I learned my first political lesson, which is that people don't always practice what they preach, particularly when the preaching requires some real personal sacrifices. And going into the cavalry meant that they were sending me, the army, to Fort Meade, South Dakota, in the Black Hills of South Dakota, Indian country then as it is today. And that was a great culture shock for me and the other GIs from New York City. We were a group that were sent there because we were all city boys, and all of the soldiers in the cavalry were the 4th Cavalry Regiment, a pre-Civil War unit. Matter of fact, one of its troops was attached to General Custer's cavalry in the Battle of Bighorn. He had the 7th Cavalry, and they were wiped out along with the General Custer. So they had a great tradition of military expertise and history. Matter of fact, John Philip Sousa wrote a march for the 4th Cavalry Band that we fell out every morning and marched to that particular march. The culture shock was such that we were New York City boys, and these were country boys. And most of us recognized that there was apparently a rule down there. If you got into trouble, you had 2 choices: go to jail or join the army. And these guys would end up joining the army. And this is pre-army, you got to remember. And these guys, they didn't have the education we had. They spoke with a different accent from our accent. And both of us tended to look down at each other for different reasons. And so we had a number of episodes in which they said, "We're going to learn you or kill you." And I think they were more desirous of killing us than learning us. But we got good training. And we went from there down in the height of the winter. General Rommel was at that time tearing up North Africa and fighting against the British and the Americans and doing a good job of winning at that point in desert warfare. So the Army, in its proper wisdom, sent us in the middle of the winter down to the deserts of Southern California and Arizona for desert training, to learn how to fight in the desert. And it's humorous that as they put us on packed me into a Jeep with the windshield down, simulating military travel, and by the time we got to the railhead, about 12 or 13 miles away, I had frostbite on my nose. And I reported for sick call the first day I was in the desert with 101 heat for frostbite on the nose, which is the way life works. We learned quickly in the desert that when you have a dry, flat spot to lie down and sack out at night, watch out that it's not a dry stream bed, because if it's going to have a southern rainstorm, you're going to end up swimming in a river. And we always thought that flat is flat, but we learned later on we don't lie on the flat, you lie on the banks, because we learned very quickly. We also learned not to touch our fingers, bare fingers, to the sides of our vehicles, our tanks, armored cars, and jeeps, because if we did at 105, 110 heat, we'd pull the finger away and the skin would be left on the skin of the tank. And we went the first time for maneuvers, which was simulated aerial attack of our cavalry unit, which was a 4th Cavalry Regiment, as I mentioned. And we had Piper planes flying overhead that would drop sacks of flour, and if they landed too close to you, the referees would indicate, "You guys got hit, you're out of the games." And so we had to maneuver our vehicles to keep moving and yet follow out our combat mission. I was a radio operator for the 4th Cavalry Regiment headquarters troop I was in. I was the best radio operator they had until I was assigned to headquarters troop. I was surprised to be the best radio operator, but I was. And at that time, we did everything by code. You punch into the machine, the coding for that day, the cipher and so forth. And then you punch out the information. And if you get the cipher wrong, if you type the wrong thing on your leg key, the key you had on your foot, the hit with the Morse code, we did that, the message would come out garbled. Anyway, here I am sitting on the back of this half-track, bouncing around. The half-track was like an open vehicle, back with the cab and then with the open portion metal. I'm bouncing around on a loose chair, trying to get my leg key to work, getting messages given to me and back and forth, writing them out. I remembered my colonel, full colonel, chicken colonel, the one with the eagles on the shoulders, comes rushing up in the squad car. He said, give me your messages. And I hand him over a bunch of messages. And frankly, they were all garbled because by that time, my handwriting was bad, my receiving was bad, and all that kind of stuff. And he looked at it, he was, I can't read that stuff with a lot of profanity, and he threw the stuff down. He said, what kind of stuff is this? Using 4-letter words and other kinds of words. And I got mad. I've been sweating. The sweat was running down me. I'm over the 100-degree heat. And I'm trying the best I do. I remember I picked up my leg key, which was attached to my leg. It clamps on, and I picked it up, and I threw it down, and I jumped up, and I said, gosh darn it, I said, with my own flow of profanity back to the colonel, I'm doing the best I can. We're in the desert training. We're practicing. We're learning how to do it. Jesus, come on now, come on. At which point he looked at me, turned, sat down in his squad car, and he had a major with him who was an aide-de-camp. Drives off. A couple of minutes later, the major comes back by himself. He says to me, soldier, you know who you were talking to? I said, yes, I was talking to the colonel. He says, hey, soldier, you don't talk to the colonel that way. But he said, let me tell you something. You may want to cut this out. He admires you guys. You got balls. And he said, but look, you remember now, you're in the Army. You got to be careful how you address an officer, even when you're angry. I said, yes, sir. So that was my first run-in with the military in that particular stage. We went from a camp, from the desert training, which was hot, dry weather, to Camp Maxey, Texas, near Paris, Texas, in the northeast corner, near Texarkana, Texas, of Texas. Camp Maxey was outside the city limits of the city of Paris, Texas, which by name sounds like it's in France, but by practice was everything but French. And there the weather was not hot and humid and dry, but hot and sweaty. So we went from one area to another. They give us a pass to walk into town. It wasn't too far from town. I'm walking to town the first time I get a pass, and I enter the city limits, and there's a big billboard sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce of Paris, Texas. It says, welcome to Paris, Texas, the blackest earth and the whitest people. I hope that was an odd combination, I said to myself. And just as I'm walking right after this billboard, here comes a young black kid about 15 years of age in the opposite direction, leaving town. I'm going in. The sidewalk we had was narrow, but wide enough for two people could pass at one time. He came to a couple of paces of me, and he steps off the sidewalk into the gutter. So when we pass, he's in the gutter and I'm on the sidewalk. Again, I began to realize I'm in the Deep South now, and this is 1940s, that America, who was fighting for freedom for the world, had a problem at home. And I recognized for the first time one-on-one racism. Could we stop at that moment?
Their words.
Yeah.
Okay. We were at Camp Maxey until the early fall of 1944. And if you remember, I enlisted in November of 1942, and America at that point was gearing up for what obviously everybody recognized would be an invasion in more than one place in Europe. And of course, we were actively attacking and being counterattacked in the Pacific. We didn't know to what theater we were going to be sent, but no one asked me for my opinion, and I had no opportunity to give it, okay? Anyway, now we're on getting ready to go. We were told to the East Coast, designation given to us, by train, another slow train, another milk train, another train stuck to the sidings when the express trains and commercial traffic went by, to the East Coast to get on a ship to go to Europe. We assumed it was Europe because they didn't send us to a port on the West Coast, which logic would indicate would go to Pacific. That much we can figure out for ourselves. And the trip can be defined, this last railroad trip that I took in the States before leaving for Europe, as one word beginning with M, monotonous. But that it was, and therefore uneventful. Incidentally, the Army had told us never to keep a diary because if it fell into enemy hands, even in the United States, it could be harmful to us. Like seal your lips because speaking lips can sink ships. They had all these kinds of slogans at that point. I never kept a diary for that reason throughout the war, and I wish I had. I'd be better off now in telling the story, except from memory. But every general I ever ran into kept a diary. So I guess the rules didn't always work for the officers as they did for the enlisted men. In any event, we get staged out of the East Coast in late fall of 44. The 4th Cavalry crosses the Atlantic to England. En route, I saw and heard nothing. The reason being I was deep down in the hold. And if the ship was hit by a torpedo, I wouldn't have known it for very long because we would have been down, down, down very fast. It was a British ship, that much we knew, because the food was terrible. Not that Army food is necessarily, a 3-star or a Michelin meal, but this was British food, which maybe they liked at that point, but I was not used to. But that was the least of our concerns. We wanted to get across the ocean. We can look out of a porthole occasionally, and we can see a lot of other ships who were in convoy, obviously. And fortunately, we made it to to England. In England, we landed in an area near near I forget the name of the Bognor Regis, that area down there, Chichester. That's it, on the coast. And they gave us a couple hours pass in town, told us that we could not buy any food in England. It was on the ration at that point, and England was being buzz-bombed, attacked from Germany. And we can only buy bread, for example, or go into a pub and get a drink, which was a great deal for me. I was only 19 years old, 20 at that point, I think. Still below the drinking age, could never drink in the United States. And here I can go into a pub and get anything I wanted. So I walk into this pub, and there too in England, we were billeted along railroad tracks. You can't get away from railroads when you're in the military at that point. And there's a bunch of row houses, English row houses, with their back portions, windows opening onto the tracks. And I walk into town, it's daylight, and which is part of the story because there's blackouts in England at that point. And I go into this local pub, and the pub guy sees me there. We're the first GIs in the area. We might want to close it because of the barking. Yeah. We were the first GIs in the area, and he was very welcoming of us being there. And he said, "What do you have, Yank?" I said, "What do you got?" I don't know what they had. He said, "Well, one of our local specialties is we make a really nice cider." I said, "Oh, cider, that sounds real good." To me, cider was like apple juice with another little taste. I said, I'll have a cider. He gave me the cider. I drank it real fast. It went down real good. Drank another one, went down equally good. I didn't realize it was about 8 or 9% alcohol. About after the third or fourth one, I was feeling really good, really relaxed. Maybe a couple hours that transpired because we were chatting with people in there. They were curious about us Yanks, and I was curious about these people. I then stepped out of the pub to get back to my billet, which was down the slope of the street, fortunately, a cobblestone street with granite faced sidewalks, which is part of my story in a moment, heading down to where I knew the tracks were, where my billet was, in a tent. I step outside and gosh, I'm in the total black, darkness, not a light to be seen anywhere. Well, the curtains over everything was blackout. I couldn't find my way, and I was obviously not all there either. But I remember that there was a curb in front of where I came off. I carefully, on hands and knees, felt with my fingers until I felt the curb, put one foot in the gutter, the other foot on the sidewalk, and as long as I had curb with one foot in and one foot out, I worked my way down the slope, got to the corner, a problem. There was no more curb. But I kind of figured if I followed the line with the fingertips, the way they laid these basalt granite blocks of stone, I get to the other side. I did. I got to my other side. I could just about figure out where by the contours of those houses, where the train tracks were. I get to my billet, flop myself into my tent. About 5 o'clock in the morning, I wake up with the world's worst bellyache. I get out of my billet, go to the side of my tent, and I throw up. I must have evacuated every one of those pints that I had. And while I'm throwing up, the sun is now rising up. There's an elderly, to me elderly, she must have been 50 years of age, and I'm 20. Today, elderly is not 50. We recognize that. And she's looking out with her hands, arms crossed on the windowsill, and she sees me, and she says, "Oh, poor Yank, you had too much of our cider." She obviously had seen that particular thing played out before. And so that was my introduction to England at that particular point, which otherwise was a very wonderful, wonderful place to be in. Green, and the people were wonderful to us as Yanks. They used to kid us, though, by saying that you Yanks are overpaid, over here, and oversexed. And it was said with a smile, so nobody took umbrage. And they moved us then from the coastal area inland to Glastonbury, where there's a great abbey, it's destroyed now, near Bath, on the western part of England, away from the buzz bomb area, where they sent the kids who were evacuated from the London and big city areas. So they put the GIs, we GIs always used to laugh, they put us combat type guys where they put the kids away from the buzz bomb attacks of the Germans, because those bombs did not travel that far inland. And they now billeted us, and this is an interesting part of the story of my evolution in learning how to cope with the Army. They billeted my headquarters unit and all the officers of the regiment in a beautiful villa, the kind you read about and see in those Jane Eyre type pictures. Beautiful place with a gateway and a courtyard, cobblestone. And they put the enlisted men. I was in headquarters troop, and headquarters troop not being a line troop of the cavalry at that point, being a communications troop, which is very important. Without communication, your cavalry, your reconnaissance means nothing. So we had 57 men, and I, being the chief radio operator, was in headquarters troop. So they billeted us in Nissen huts, those round semicircular corrugated steel structures that had no internal toilet facilities, but we had toilet facilities, and what were they? Very rudimentary. You had to walk out into the open. Mind you, this is fall and gonna be winter in England. And the Germans, excuse me, the British built a little shelter overhead with corrugated metal, open on all four sides, planks that had holes in them, and under the plank was a bucket, a coal scuttle bucket. And you sat on the plank, evacuated your bowels, and urinated in that bucket, and when it was filled to a certain point, somebody took them away, emptied them out, and brought them back. But there was wind blowing through, and a lot of guys didn't want to go to the bathroom after a while because it was too cold, and they were getting constipated and stuff like that. And they said to me, "Hey, professor, what are we going to do about that?" They knew I was a college student. They called me professor, not really as a laudatory thing. It was a pejorative, you know. They were smart-assing me in so many words, okay? But he would say, they recognized I knew a little bit more than they did. They say, "Professor, what are we going to do about this?" I said, "Well, I'll figure out something." So I went on sick call the next day, and I get in to see the doctor, the medic, captain. Happened to be a guy from the Bronx of New York, so we had empathy right there. He was a Yankee fan, I was a Brooklyn Dodger fan, but other than that, we got along well. He said, "What's wrong with you? Nothing wrong with you right now, soldier. What are you doing here?" I said, "But I'm going to be sick in a couple of days, so you got to do something about it." And I explained to him what was happening. The guy didn't want to go to the bathroom and stuff like that, and they wouldn't let us use. There were toilets that we could use in the facility, in the mansion, but they wouldn't let us into the manor house. But there was a servant entrance that had a toilet right off the servant entrance on the side, which is where the servants would normally go. And he wouldn't let us even use that one. So he said, "I see your point." And he goes through some manuals. He said, "Wait a minute. According to the regulations, an officer cannot billet his men except where all the facilities, sanitation-wise, are of comparable impact." He said, "I'll go over there tomorrow and condemn the place and tell him he has to move unless he provides interior toilet facilities." And the colonel goes there. The captain goes there, does that. I didn't know that he'd want to go right then, but he did. What happens? 4 o'clock in the morning, we all get rousted out of our bunks in the Nielsen place, and we're all lined up now in this courtyard. And I happen to be the last guy to fall out, and there were 57 guys lined up in the courtyard with a sergeant major, an old-fashioned type, professional, 20-year sergeant major type, tough SOB, okay? And he says, "Who was the SOB who turned the colonel in?" Because obviously the colonel was told to either move or give a facility, okay? And it was like a Broadway chorus line stage play. 56 hands all went and pointed to Art Katz at the end of the line. And the sergeant said, "I knew it was you, Katz. I knew you would be the one." And at that point, the feces hit the fan, as we would say, insofar as my personal war with the United States Army went. They gave us the interior toilet. We got that, okay? That was fine. But then they put me on KP. And the reason why I was on KP, and I shouldn't have been, is because I had already been earlier in trouble with them. In the States, they all said to us, "You are a private first class, but everybody's going to be promoted in grade when we get to Europe." So we get to Europe, I look up on the chart, I'm still a PFC. I haven't become a technician 5th grade, which made me a corporal, which meant I got rid of all that time. We did our own KP, all the other kind of stuff which say to give to private people. And I got other privileges, not only more money, but ability to go to a non-coms club and stuff like that. So I go into my officer. He's now a captain. He was a lieutenant the day before they posted the ratings. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, the table of organization only allows for X numbers of T5s. The colonel is a dog robber." That's what they call the orderly who did the work for the colonel, who was his driver. was a PFC, but he would take the colonel into town, and the colonel would go. He became a real British type of guy with a swagger stick under his arm into the officers' club, and next door was an uncomes club. And that poor driver couldn't go into the Nuncomes Club because he was only a PFC. He had to sit out in the cold until the colonel came out of the officers' club. So the colonel promoted him to T5 so he can get into the Nuncomes Club. I said, but where did he get the rating from? They took it from you. So why did he take it from me? He said, well, they had to take it from somebody. I said, hey, I don't like that. So what did I do? I went back to my armored car, which had been signed out to me with all the expensive radio equipment in there. I unscrewed, unplugged, untied every damn thing that could move out of there, loaded my arms down with it, and went back into my officer, walked right past the orderly, dumped the stuff on his desk. He said, what's all this crap doing here? I said, look, I'm signed out for this equipment. I'm made responsible for it. You can take it out of my pay if I break, lose, or give it away. Since I'm not being paid, I don't want to do the job. If this was a civilian job, I quit. But I'm in the Army. I enlisted. I'm here for the duration. But if you're not going to pay me, I'm not going to do the job. And I walk out. The colonel is told about this, of course. And he calls me in. And he doesn't say anything about apologizing for taking away my rating. He said, what's the problem, Katz? He remembered me from the story I told you about desert training. And he liked me being feisty up to a point. But now I'm really feisty where I'm crossing the line, apparently. And he says, I know you enlisted. We're very proud of the fact that you enlisted, but why did you enlist? I said, I enlisted to fight fascism. And he says to me, well, fine, we're all in here to fight fascism. When we cross the channel, you'll have plenty of chance to fight fascism. I said, no, I'm fighting it now. He said, where are you fighting it? I said, in the American Army. At which point, his face blanched. He was a ruddy-faced guy. I can see the blood draining out of his face. He got real angry with me. And he looked at me. He says, dismissed. No salute, nothing. I'm out of there, okay? And then they started the treatment. Because just as I had smarted off with the captain, when the captain said, what do you need worrying about your rating? We're all in the war to win the war. I said, well, if you're not worried about the rating, captain, why don't you give it back and become a lieutenant again? That's the type of smart ass I was, which was stupid. But that was the way I was expressing myself. So they ended up giving me all these assignments from KP to cleaning this up, to standing guard duty, ceremonial guard duty. We weren't worried about being attacked by the Germans. But our colonel had noticed that all the other places he visited had a smart-looking British guy standing there and guard. And so he arranged us to have somebody standing by our gate all the time on 4-hour tours. And I was doing 4 hours tours twice a day, okay? That's 8 hours standing out in the cold and the rain and so forth. One particular day, it was very, very rainy. The wall had a little nook in it where you can see out everything and challenge anybody who came by, but you're in the lee side of the wall so you didn't get rained on. I'm standing there, it's past midnight, an officer comes by. I challenge him after he walked by me about 3 or 4 paces. And he turns around and he says, you let me get by. You're sleeping on your post. I said, I'm not sleeping on my post. I'm tired, but I'm not sleeping on my post. Ended up, they court-martialed me. Charged me with sleeping on my post, under combat. And the sergeant major comes in and rubs me up at that point. I'm confined now. He says, boy, in the war, we shoot guys like you. And for a minute, this is for real. This is crazy. So that they got rid of me very simply. They gave me a summary court-martial. Never saw a lawyer. I never did anything. All I know, a couple of days after that, I'm bundled into the back of the squad car with the colonel and a driver and the Roman Catholic pastor who's the colonel's regiment's chaplain. And they drive me to this military prison, a British prison that the British turned over to us to use for our military as part of the Lend-Lease program. We gave them battleships, you know, and they gave us prisons and Long John underwear, which is part of my story later on. I'm now in this very tough place. They didn't discriminate between whether a guy was absent without leave or whether he was drunk or whether he had raped or murdered anybody. So there was hardened criminals in there, guys I was scared of. I remember the first evening I get there, they walked me up to the third or fourth floor of a very primitive type prison. Your cell was maybe about 8 feet wide and about 10 feet deep. The bed was 3 wooden planks on 2 wooden bolsters, a window on the top, a little slot on the door for putting food in and looking inside. Toilet with a bucket that you use. And I remember the MP who brought me into my cell the first day walks me in there and locks me in there. And the next morning he comes to let me out for breakfast. He said, "How did you sleep, Katz?" And I said, "It wasn't too bad. The bed was soft pine." I'm still a smart aleck, you see. I can see the look in his face that he didn't like that stuff. So at that point, I learned again, hey, you got to learn. So I didn't make any more cracks like that. But having all that standing and all that weather, my legs apparently got a problem with it. They began to swell. I had great difficulty walking down all those steps to get down to the mess hall, which incidentally only had one utensil, a spoon. They didn't give you any knives, they didn't give you any forks, they become weapons, you know that. So I began to drag myself. And he said, "Hey, come on, Katz, you're dragging your ass, you're malingering, get down there." I said, "My legs are really, I can't hardly walk," which was true. So he thought I was, "Yeah, like all you guys, you're all faking it. None of you guys ever committed any crimes, you're all innocent, you're all in by mistake." The typical attitude these guys have. I can understand it. But one of them said to me, "Let me just look at your leg." And I pulled up my pants and it looked like an elephant's leg. That's how wide it was, swollen. He said, "Oh, I better get somebody for you." He got me the local medic. The medic merely called the doctor. The doctor put me into the infirmary in the prison. Now I'm in a place, I got real sheets, a real bed, nurses who are dedicated to taking care of people, regardless of who they are. They recognized pretty quickly that I was a nice guy. "What are you doing in here?" I said, "I talk too much. That's why I'm in here." All right. So I'm in here maybe a couple of days. I said, "Can you get me a pencil?" I know they wouldn't give me a pen. You can stick somebody with a pen. They give me a pencil and a pad. And it was British wallpaper, almost gray. You know, and I wrote a little note to the commandant of the prison telling him, instead of the prison was called a Disciplinary Training Center, DTC. They don't call it a prison, it's a Disciplinary Training Center. They're training people how to be disciplined. To digress, when I wasn't there, I had to change my address from the 4th Cavalry. So when I wrote to my mother, I put down DTC. And I told her I would now transfer to the dump truck company. She never knew until I got home what it really was. So I write the note to the commandant, and I tell him that I enlisted in the service to fight for my country. I gave up my military deferment, and I was happy to do that. And I really wanted an opportunity to get back. I was very contrite in my writing. I made it clear I had learned my lesson. I understood the importance of authority, the importance of discipline, the importance of working together as a homogeneous unit. And I would please give me an opportunity to go out and serve my country again. This is before the invasion, of course. 2 days later, a major comes and visits me in the infirmary. He says, "The colonel who run the prison, he was very impressed with your letter. Our system works. You have been rehabilitated." You know, right?
Yes.
They were very happy. You know? He said, "You're released as of tomorrow." And he put me into the replacement center, the Repel Depot, they call it, where guys who were being assigned to other units. The invasion had already taken place a week or two before, and we were getting guys coming back from broken units who were getting reassigned to other units. And I said, "Do me a favor." I said, "Reassign me, please, to a cavalry unit but please don't put me into a headquarters troop. I don't want any of that chicken shit stuff. Give me a line troop. So I got into the 86th Cavalry Reconnaissance Squadron Mechanized, which is a much smaller unit than a regiment. We had maybe 700 men total, I think. Same format, a headquarters troop, 4 line troops, A, B, C, D. E and F was support troops, like light tanks. The other 4 troops, I was in Troop D, dog troop. That time we called it dog. Today I think they have another symbol for D. Okay, Abel Baker Charlie dog is what we had. And I was a radio operator and gunner. We went from the replacement center, and no one said a word to me when I got there. They knew what my record was, obviously the office, but nobody said a word to me. We need a good radio operator. You're the best one we got. We're happy to have you. Okay? I love that. You know, I'm sliding all over on page 1 in the service. We get over to, I think it was, the invasion was the 6th of June, I believe it was. Yeah, was it 6th of June? Yeah. This was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks later in June. We now land at St. Lo. We hadn't gone very far inside, but St. Lo was in Normandy, where for the first and I think the last time I saw my full squadron together in one unit, because we always fought as cavalry in small units, reconnaissance units, and even those were broken down into patrols. So the only time I remember seeing all of the unit at one time was at St. Lo. After that, we went our separate ways. We always communicated, but I never saw them all in one fell swoop anymore. The first day, we're in St. Lo, or Saint Loup as they call it in French, I believe. Saint Lo. We could hear the artillery pounding. Our aircraft was flying overhead. The Germans still had a very good air force at that point. And we were told to build slit trenches for ourselves on the perimeter of this field, which we're in. It was a farmland that was now vacant, okay? And there were hedgerows all around, the mounds of earth on which they built bushes and so forth. The French did, like in New England, when they take the stones out, they pile them up on the edge of the field. They would do that with hedgerows, which became weapons as well as defensive positions, depending upon how you use them. And we're in there. I look up, I remember there was a drone of noise. I looked up and there was one of our aircraft flying, and all of a sudden it exploded. It was one of a B-17 or a B-19. It got hit by anti-aircraft fire. Literally, silently, you saw it falling apart, falling to earth. It was the first time I saw something happening like that. It was really shocking. I thought, like, these guys are dying up there. No parachutes came out, nothing. And I built the most beautiful slit trench I ever built in my career in the Army. Straight sides, deep enough so that I can get myself well below grade. No loose earth that can fall back on me and stuff like that. And just the right length so that I can put my helmet over my head when I'm lying down in there, and hopefully it won't get a direct hit, okay? We're out there milling about when all of a sudden a shell comes roaring in. The Germans found we were there. They were shooting at us blind. They knew we were there, couldn't see us, but they looped it in. It was a mortar shell. It made a great explosion at the edge of the field, and everybody ran for cover. I ran to my slit trench, and the guy was already in there. Big, burly guy. I said, that's my hole. Get yourself, find yourself another one. So I ran around until I could find another one that I didn't dig. That wasn't as good as mine, but it was below grade. Okay. Get out of there. We now had faced our first fire, and I realized, hey, that roaring sound like a railroad car come rushing at you. The sound, that whooshing sound, and the explosion, and the ground shaking. Nobody was hit, fortunately. Later on that day, it's a humorous part, I had to go to evacuate my bowels. I had the same situation in Fort Meade, South Dakota. I think I mentioned that to you. And in which I had asked my sergeant, who was from Arkansas, for toilet tissue, and he thought I was smart sassing him, you know. And if you want to cut it out, you can do that later on. He said, if you want shit paper, you ask for it. Don't go asking me with your New York smart talk. So I had learned my lesson. When you want toilet tissue, you don't ask for toilet tissue, you ask for the other one. So I remember I asked for that particular tissue. They gave it to me. I'm walking now, it's part of the story. In my right hand, the roll of tissue, otherwise unarmed. I go into the hedgerow to relieve myself. And as I'm walking in there, to get deep enough in so I'm not seen by anybody, there's a rustle in front of me. I look, and there's a German soldier crouching there, who immediately springs up when he sees me, throws his hands up in the air, and he says, "Schieße nicht, don't shoot." My toilet tissue looked like a weapon. And he was hiding out, hoping that when we passed through, he could, make his way back. A lot of them did that. Some worked, and sometimes it didn't work. So I remember walking him out of there with his hands up, Hände hoch, with me right behind him with my toilet tissue still in my hand. And I turned him over to the headquarters. Everybody laughed. He said, "Hey, Katz just caught his first a German with a roll of shit paper." So I was a hero for a day, okay? So that's the type of funny things that happen in reality. I see people killed 1 minute, the next minute, you have some fun and games. Now, can we just take a break? Oh, let's do this. Okay, and then we can stop again. You ready to go?
You call the shot.
Okay. As I stated earlier, the only time I saw my full cavalry squadron in one place was in St. Lo. Thereafter, we broke off into our different units and parts and began to do our patrols. The 86th Cavalry was attached as the reconnaissance arm of the 6th Armored Division, which was one of the 2 armored divisions, the other being the 4th, which were part of Patton's 3rd Army, which had, of course, artillery and infantry units. And as the recon arm of the 6th Army, we went where it went. It was sent by Patton to go along the coast from Normandy into Brittany, down the Atlantic side of France, to hem in those Germans that were still there, to cut off Saint-Nazaire and other submarine posts from the interior, which were being done by a naval blockade from the exterior. And it was in Brittany, on one of our patrols, that my driver, I was sitting in the front seat of the Jeep, and we had a French kid, a Maquis, the underground, in the back who spoke French much better than either I did or my driver, who was an American also. And we were rounding up collaborators, and at the same time looking for pockets of Germans who had been left behind and were trying to get out again. And we came to an edge of a road. There were no sidewalks in those French rural towns. The houses were built right up the edge of the street, so that you can come to a corner and not know what was around the corner unless you were passing that corner. And at which point, you might end up that they find out on the other side of the corner was a German tank waiting for you. And my driver thought he saw the muzzle of a German tank at an intersection we were approaching on this road, and he swerved to avoid it. The tank actually moved. Nobody shot at us, but he swerved, and in turning, lost control of the vehicle, and he tossed us into the ditch next to this hedgerow. He got thrown out, the Maquis kid got thrown out. I got my head thrown against the .50 caliber mounted on the hood of the Jeep. The 50 caliber has a what they call a butterfly trigger. You hold with two hands to fire it. And that banged me into my face, broke my hand, my right hand when I fell out of the vehicle, thrown out rather. Tore up my left side of my face, my left eye. I still have the scars on my left side of my face, and smashed up my mouth. Fortunately, I didn't lose any teeth, but they shook them up. The next thing I remember is I'm lying on my back on this road. A friendly-looking French farmer is looking down on me, an elderly gentleman, and I reach for my face, and it's all numb. I can't feel anything. There's a dullness, but I don't feel any teeth. And so I was concerned that as a kid of 19 or 20 or 21 or 20 at that point, I lost all my teeth, which would be no good for my future as a young man. And I remember saying in French, mes dents, my teeth. And the farmer looked down at me and he smiled and he says, sont bons, they're okay. In which case, I knew I had my teeth and I conked out. Next thing I remember, I'm on the operating table in the field hospital. They roll up my sleeve on the left side to take some blood, whatever. And I noticed how dirty my hands were up through my wrist portion. And I apologized to the doctors at the table that my hands were so dirty. And I remember one of them, I don't know who he was because I couldn't see him, says in a laughing voice, he says, "Soldier, you're not on a picnic, you're in a war." And so I understood. I shouldn't worry about the fact that my hands were not fully washed. And that was the first time that I was hurt. Now, the military mission of the 86th Cavalry was to get information, and we got it in a number of ways, and to send it back. We would get it by going out on small patrols. Unlike the infantry, we knew every day where we were going. They told us where we wanted us to go. We had maps with us. We had fallback plans, how to fall back or fall out, to wait for something to come by and relieve us if necessary. And with my unit of my armored car, in which I was a car commander and radio operator, we had a gunner. We had a 37 millimeter gun and a 30 caliber that were synchronized to fire together. We had a 50 caliber on the hood, on the top of the turret, which was open incidentally to the sky. Two drivers, one an assistant driver, 4 people in the unit. We would have 3 Jeeps, each had 2 guys in them with 50s mounted on their hoods, so we had 10 guys in a patrol. We went looking for the Germans. We would detect them either by looking at their tracks and see where they were going, or where we thought they were going, where they had been. We looked for such signs as, like for example, we would find occasionally a dead German that was left behind in the haste of getting away, which normally they would take their dead with them, as we would do, of course. We looked through the uniform of the German. They kept all of their records in a Soldbuch, S-O-L-D-B-U-C-H, which had their military record, their health record, everything. And written in Sitterling, which was a German style of writing, which they don't use today in Germany, which I learned. I taught myself to read, because by reading it, I could tell what unit the guy was from and so forth. And if he was captured alive, I would read it the same way. In any event, if we couldn't find any Germans around, we would try to attract them by making noises ourselves. We knew they were in the vicinity, and if we would draw their fire, we would figure out from their fire, 1, where it was coming from, 2, what kind of fire it was. If it was mortar, or whether it was artillery, we would know then that we had units of that kind there, and we would report that information back. If we didn't see them when they saw us first and fire upon us, we would try to engage them long enough to find out who and what they were. We never were armed enough to engage in a heavy firefight, and so we would get the heck out of there. And informed by radio, by that time we were using plain English, because we found these coding didn't work in the excitement of the situation, and indicate where we were and get the heck out of there. So we were always on the prowl, on the move. And in the course of these patrols, we would take occasionally a break. One of these days, this was, we were moving east with Patton's Third Army. We are now out of Brittany. We're on the plains of France. We were past Orléans, heading for Strasbourg and that area of Germany and France. And there was a copse of trees planted artificially, growing they use them to grow wood and chop them down at a certain time. Everything was done very orderly, laid out in nice rows. And we thought this was early fall. This was a great place to hide out from whatever was left of the German Luftwaffe and from any other units while we took a break. I had rigged up a 30 or 40 foot spool of wire, which allowed me to take the radio portion of the equipment out of my armored car, put it on the ground, and tune it to the German radio station, Radio Luxembourg, the Luxembourg station that the Germans would use to give propaganda towards GIs in the field, figuring that maybe it would cause us to desert or get disheartened, whatever. And then the kind of crap we got was stuff like, while you guys are knocking yourself out and fighting the Jews' war in Germany, your women are at home with the 4Fs having fun in games, you know, that kind of stuff. But they always played great music. They played Glenn Miller and Artie Shaw and Benny Goodman, and we loved to listen to the music. So we disregarded the propaganda, of course, but we loved the music. And we were spread out on the ground that way one afternoon, taking our break with a sentry out there, a couple of, maybe 100 yards in front of our position, when he comes running back in, almost out of breath, and he says, "Squad car coming up in America." And right after he gets onto the facility where we were, on the ground, all stretched out, the radio on the ground, all our gear all over the place, the squad car comes up, and here comes this general, easily recognized as a general, and recognized as Patton. He had his helmet liner on, it was beautiful, his helmet with the 3 stars on it. He was in immaculate uniform in the middle of combat, aide-de-camp and driver, and he strides out of his vehicle, and he looks around, and what does he see? The back of our armored car is hanging with our laundry, because it was a rear-engine vehicle, and the exhaust of the vehicle, when it drove, would dry off our laundry. I had my boots out there, my underwear was hanging there, I remember that time. And we had white stars painted on the turret of both sides of our armored car. The turret revolved, incidentally, like the monitor in the Merrimack, that type of stuff. And you revolved it by a hand crank. And we had learned after the first couple of days in combat that we lost a couple of armored cars, and we captured some Germans. I said, "How come you guys are hitting our armored car so easily?" He said, "Well, we aim at that white star." So we ended up mudding out the white star, so he couldn't see it. Patton comes up there, and he looks around, he says, "Who's in charge here?" I said, "I am," I saluted. He says, "Are you an American?" I said, "Yes, sir." It's a funny question, right? I'm in uniform. He said, "God damn it, aren't you proud to be an American? Look at that vehicle there. How come you muddied out that white star? Get that shit off there, clean it up." So we dutifully cleaned it all up. And then he walks around and he says, "You guys are out of uniform. Where are your leggings?" No, we issued leggings. I got a picture when I was in Fort Meade, South Dakota. I'm wearing leggings. But nobody ever wore them anymore. But they're in our duffel bags. Everybody went scooping around for the duffel bags to find all the leggings. I didn't find mine at all. Meanwhile, they threw all the stuff out, and he says, "Get all that crap off there. You look like a Chinese laundry." You know, we got all that stuff off the back of the vehicle and everything else. And he walks around, and he was really, you can see, he was unhappy with our physical appearance. And then he climbs back into his vehicle, and he goes charging off again. And I thought that was a very bad example of leadership. He never once asked us, And I've written a book, it's From the Embers Rising, which I'll mention later on again, about my experiences. I mentioned that he never asked, first of all, are you guys getting enough to eat? Secondly, are you getting enough to sleep? Thirdly, you got a proper equipment? Fourthly, any kind of experiences that you think are important that I should know? He didn't ask that. All he was concerned about was spit and polish in the middle of combat. He wanted us to be as fancily dressed as he was. And we all thought it was a joke. The moment he was gone, we made sure he wasn't coming back. All the crap that we took off, we put back onto the vehicle again. Like I said, we put the mud back on it and went back to our job of doing patrols. One of them, I remember distinctly, we were concerned about was minefields, because when Germans retreat, or any army retreats, the easiest way to slow an advance is to lay down minefields, which makes it difficult to find them, and then if you find them, to go through them without getting blown up. So it slows you up. And that's good for an army falling back to another defensive position to fight again. So we were concerned about minefields. Anyway, we are in this particular one, now it's later on in the year, the first snows have begun to fall. This is still in France. And I remember we found a field that had been planted in different grain during the time when the harvest now was all bare. And we work out of an area that we're going to cover. We put our guard out. And then we put out a marker where we're going to run a patrol, let's say with a big tree. We then move to that tree and back over a period of time, and we take time doing that over the nighttime period, so that we will run a patrol and looking for different things. For example, I as a platoon commander would run the first patrol. I felt the leader should always be the one that leads. And when I'm going out the first time, I look around, I saw there was a dead horse lying there. He'd already been dead a couple of days. I knew that because he'd already been rolled over on his back, bloated, with his feet sticking up in the air, which happens. You see that with cattle and women get killed the same way. So I knew that it had been hit sometime, maybe within a week, but not yesterday. So if there were troops there, they weren't there right now. That was one of the days also that I had seen a dead German that they had left there that also showed partial decomposition, which meant that they hadn't been there and got out really fast, didn't have time to pick this poor guy up, okay? I took his record out of his pocket, put it into my pocket, and later on turned it into our grave people, because when they picked him up, they were able to identify him. He wouldn't be another unknown soldier. But a lot of our guys, when we were very nasty about that, not a lot, but some, would take these things out of the guy's pocket and tear it up. He never would be identified, which was a nasty, dastardly thing to do, even to an enemy. I never liked that. So that I would come back and tell him there was a rock formation about standing by 8 feet high, and they looked like a bunch of guys standing there. So don't get worried about it. Start shooting at nighttime and expose yourself in case they're hiding someplace else looking for us. I run the patrol. I go through this field, make a path, straight path, come back the same way I went. We always go the same way we go, same way came back. My next patrol ran, the third patrol, the fourth patrol, they wake me up again about 8 hours later. By that time, a path had gone through 18 inches wide or so that I had laid down, and everybody followed it very carefully, stepping in everybody else's footprints. I go now, it had begun to snow. I begin to go across the field, and I look down, which I normally would cautiously in any case, and I noticed something interesting. Sticking out on both sides of this 18-inch or so path that we had made were things sticking up out of the ground that were very uniform, Y-shaped things sticking up out of the ground like double-bladed pieces of grass off a single stem, but uniform. And the difference was that these all had frost on them, had ice on them, while all the grass and the stubble around it was moist, but nothing of that nature. So I looked down close, I recognized, hey, those are these parts of anti-personnel mines that will, if you step on, they'll blow up. They were the metallic portions that took the cold and froze from the moisture. I'm standing there inches away on both sides from this particular minefield that we'd all walked through very safely for hours now. Fortunately, because we all followed the rule, follow the steps of the guy in front of you. I had normally taken that, it took me normally maybe 10 or 15 minutes to go one way and back along that stretch that we had covered as our scope of territory. Now that I had discovered where we were, it took me, even when I cautiously managed to, I knew I couldn't turn around, so I kept and finished up my tour to the other end, turned around, began to walk back, following as within that narrow pathway my steps. The guys back where I came from, they began to say, my unit, where the hell is Katz? They used another word beginning with F, but that's not the point. They said, where the heck is Katz? What happened to them? They didn't hear any shouting. They didn't hear any shooting. So it could have been that they captured me and put something over my mouth so they wouldn't hear me anyway, or shot me with some way or hit me with something that it wouldn't make any noise. Where is he? What happened? I finally made my way back, and I realized I had walked through a minefield, you see. That made a great impression on me, that we had survived that factor. And the minefield kept in my mind because it became the thing that ended up hurting me the second time very badly when I ran this attack later on after the Battle of Bastogne, when we were working back our way into Germany but acting as infantry, more or less, dismounted, because we had lost so many men in the Battle of the Bulge that they took our cavalry function of recon. We recognized where the Germans were, more or less. So now they were using us almost like infantry, dismounted, okay? With the ability of being flexible by having the units of mobility. So let's take a break right at this particular point. Cavalry squadron in the Battle of the Bulge, as they called it, in Bastogne, in Belgium. It was, I believe it was day before Christmas or Christmas Day of 1944. We were in an area north of Strasbourg in central France, having taken Metz and Nancy and Colmar with Patton's Third Army, and we were. I remember I was being served my Christmas dinner on a mess plate. I was being served my Christmas dinner on a mess plate, and beautiful turkey and gravy and mashed potatoes and vegetables, and plopped on top of it a scoop of ice cream. So you had to eat the ice cream first before you got to anything else. As we're eating that, they ordered us to mount up. We're moving out. We mounted up on trucks, and why were we doing that? We were moving out to go north to get into the Battle of the Bulge. We don't know what they called it at that point. The Germans had counterattacked and were penetrating deep into Belgium, trying to get to the port of Antwerp. If they got that port, they can refit themselves again with their undersea fleet and so forth, and really cut us into half over there. So it was a very important battle on their point of view and ours. And so we get to this particular crest. Our vehicles were all the usual German, American tanks and armored cars with our khaki colors and our green colors. Snow on the ground, snow swirling about. The Germans had their white costumes on. Their vehicles were painted white, just like the Russians would do in their stuff. And we were good targets. We got to the crest of this particular hill, which was an abandoned fancy, must have been a fancy farm, beautiful two-story structure with a deep potato cellar, which overlooked the valley. On the other side of the valley was another ridge which was occupied by the Germans. We knew that from our recon. They could see us in the sense that they can see the people on the hill if we expose ourselves, much as we could see them, but they were not exposed. And we pulled in, and I instructed my platoon to put their vehicles on the lee side of whatever structures we can find in buildings, so that they weren't exposed to the other people, the Germans. And we did that. We had a new officer come in from ROTC, from Louisiana State University. He replaced another officer that we had, the way everybody loved, and who had been apparently promoted to another position. He joined us, I think, the day before. He was in the deep potato cellar, and he was calling in men to meet them for the first time. I was asked to go down in my turn. Apparently it was alphabetical order. And I'm there, he's sitting behind the desk, and he looks up, and he says, Katz, he says, oh, you're the white nigger. White nigger, I never heard that expression before. I said, what do you mean by white nigger? He says, well, you're the Jew, he says. You're the guy we're fighting this goddamn war for, to save your ass. He says, otherwise we wouldn't be fighting this war. And I was taken aback by it, but I wasn't about to say much. What could you say, except I thought this guy was a dummy. And at which point, I didn't even salute. I just wheeled out of there and went out back on the ground. He then, the sergeant came out and said, who ordered you to move your vehicles where you moved them? I said, I did, because I don't think we should be exposed. He said, well, the captain doesn't want, the lieutenant doesn't want you to do that. He said, we're Americans. We should be proud of Americans. We shouldn't be afraid to show our face. I want those vehicles moved. So early during the night, we moved them. And the next morning, at first daylight, by golly, with all the vehicles now out in the open, we drew incoming fire. A roar came in there, and a shell landed. The first one didn't hit anything. The second one they corrected, and it's meant right into one of our armored cars of my dog troop. And we lost. He had us mount our men up in the vehicles, not the drivers. We had no place to drive. And we lost 2 men. And we had never lost any men in all our combat. We had guys wounded like myself, but we never had anybody killed. And this was a great loss to us. These guys were blown to pieces. It was pitiful. I don't want to describe it. It's too gory. He then, the sergeant comes to me and said, Katz, he said, the lieutenant wants you to sit point. The point was a slit trench we had built on the perimeter of our position that overlooked the valley below us and the other side. But it was now useless to sit out there because we would be exposed. They knew we were there. No sense sitting out there to look for something. So I said, I'm not going to go sit in that hole. It's crazy. So he said, well, I'm going to report you to the lieutenant. Go ahead. He reported me to the lieutenant. He asked me to come, order me down to the basement. The lieutenant sitting behind his desk. He said, are you refusing an order of mine? I said, yeah. I said, stupid order. I'm not going to sit in that location. He said, I order you to do it. I said, I'll tell you what, Lieutenant, and people are standing around. There were 4 or 5 guys in the room. I said, I'll tell you what, Lieutenant, if you sit with me, I'll sit. You don't say a word. I don't say a word. I get up and I walk out. I must have been a few paces out of the basement when I get a call from the first sergeant who called my name. I turn around, and as I turn around, he punches me hard in the stomach, hit me so hard that he knocked my helmet off my head, dislodged the helmet liner, the plastic thing, and I still had my little knitted cap on. I bent down to pick up my helmet, and a rabbit hits me right in the back of my neck. My first reaction is to get up and hit him. But I recognize I hit an uncom. He can argue that I attacked him first. Hitting an uncom officer is a court-martial offense. I've been through that route, so I was street smart. I wasn't about to do it again. I said, look, you son of a bitch, you hit me. I'm not going to hit you back. And, but just stay away from me. At that particular point, some of my platoon had recognized something going on and began to amble up to me, in which case he turned and left me. So this is an example of one of the few instances of overt anti-Semitism that I encountered in the service. For the most part, nobody made remarks about anybody else's religion or anything else, or regional areas. Maybe you would joke about something, but never of the kind that I just illuminated. So now we are working our way back south from Bastogne, go back through Luxembourg. We enter into Germany in the Ardennes forest, the Eifelgebiet, that they call it in German. Very hilly terrain. The Germans were doing what they should be doing in the fighting a defensive war. They were mining the area heavily. This particular valley we wanted to go up through was heavily mined and closed on both sides by high slopes that you had to go through that particular, not really a valley, but an open area between those two sides of hills. And they had put in there 6 heavily armored, heavily dug in pillboxes, ringed with trenches, which I'll describe in a moment, which were not trenches for human beings, but designed to impede our forward motion. They had laced it with anti-personnel mines. They had laced it with anti-tank mines. They had denuded the slope so that the place was like an open field laced with deadly weapons that were not seen. And I remember we paused our advance at the base of that particular hill or slope, which is about 100 and maybe a 60-degree slope, and ran for maybe 600 meters up. Heavy slopes on both sides. And I'm called into headquarters of my cavalry unit. And I say to them, every time I get called in, I'm in trouble. What did I do wrong now? And I'm trying to figure out, what did I do wrong, I couldn't, this was my whole squadron again, at one time again, together. And now I'm talking to headquarters, 2 people. I said, what did I do wrong? I racked my brain. I couldn't think anything I did wrong. They called me in, and they didn't call me in to jump it off. And he said to me, "Hey, Katz, we have a program going right now from headquarters. They asked us to find the best soldiers we got to see if they want to volunteer to go to infantry officer candidate school to make up for some of the guys we've lost. We think very highly of your leadership skills. We've seen what you've done. Would you like to volunteer for the infantry training school?" I said, "Hey, I'm being shot at now as an enlisted man in the cavalry. I was a corporal by now, but I'm still an enlisted man." I said, "Sure, I wouldn't mind doing that. That's great." He said, "Well, we got one thing you got to do. You have to run a mission that you have to plan yourself, equip it yourself, and conduct it yourself, because they have somebody from headquarters who wants to judge your leadership ability. They don't want to take our word for it. They want to see what you can do." I said, "Fine. I have no qualms about that." They said, "Okay, figure out how we want you to take one of those pillboxes ahead of us." I said, "Okay. That's the mission." So I go back to where my vehicle was, and I sit down. And I said, I know my von Clausewitz, the German Prussian general, who wrote the leading text on Vom Kriege, on war. I had the book with me, matter of fact, I believe, or I had it with me. I read it before I went into the military, because I had bought it. No, I had it at home, but I had bought it, and I remembered. And he talked about the techniques of warfare, that the defensive is the greatest weapon, because with a defense, you slow the enemy down, and then you hit him with a lightning strike when he least expects it, which is what they did to us in Bastogne, you see, except it didn't work, fortunately. And what the Russians did to them, when they invaded Russia, and they fell back and fell back and fell back in defensive position, and then came back and hit them when they were overextended. Okay. So they were working that, they do the same thing to us. In any event, I knew that the pillboxes that they had were most likely, had about 4 guys in there. They couldn't be the top guys, because you put guys in there when you're retreating that they're all soldiers, but you don't want to leave your best men sitting in a hole, someplace, so to speak. I figured that one out logically, and von Clausewitz had said that you can defend a position of that kind with the least amount of manpower and the least caliber of manpower, because it's a fixed position. And attacking a fixed position, even for the best of troops, is a very difficult, if not impossible, situation, okay? So that's what they had done. They had these 180-degree locations of these things to cover the field of combat, minded with anti-personnel and personnel mines. They had built trenches or abutments in front of each of these pillboxes, which were buried in the ground. Only the top portions were visible. And these only had light armaments coming out of them because they figured nobody's going to attack them one-on-one because the way they laid them out, you had to come up this emplacement, and your tank then would be exposed, the belly of the tank would be exposed by that lip that was built around the perimeter of the pillbox, which then was like an inverted, like a saucer. You then had to go down the side of the saucer to be able to fire at the pillbox. But at that point, your tank is going to be stuck in the bottom of a saucer, so nobody wants to be down there. So you have to fire from the ridge portion. If you fire from the ridge portion, unless you're able to move your gun in such a way that you elevate it pointing downward, you will reduce the possibility of the belly of the tank being exposed. So that I figured out that these guys were not really in a good position. They were really psychologically trapped. They knew we were going to attack them. They can tell by the fire that we were receiving and hearing. They were really, I worked on the premise, they were trapped. And we were the guys who had freedom of movement. And therefore, I said to my officers, hey, look, I speak German, I said, as you guys know. Could I use it to interrogate the people we capture and read the data? Let me have an army tank. I'll take my squad of 8 guys, including myself. We don't have heavy tanks. Give me a big heavy tank. I mounted my men on the tank, Russian style. And I'll tell you why in a moment. And give me some armor-piercing shells. And we'll go ahead and we'll go after this first pillbox. How are you going to do that? I said, well, I'll get them to surrender. I said, I got a plan to get them to surrender. They said, okay. I think I kept it partially, because I didn't want them to turn me down and say that's a crazy plan. He said, oh, you got a plan? It's your mission. You make it, you go to Paris and officer candidate school. If you don't make it, hey, that's the way it goes, Art. Okay. Except they call me Katz. Okay. So I get my 8 guys. I give one of them a Browning automatic, a very heavy weapon. I got my radio. They gave me a long tarp, a rolled up, a red tarp that I was told when I got to the pillbox site to lay it out, unroll it so that we had spotter plane going overhead that was giving our artillery, was falling in front of us where we were shelling the area, would lift the fire to know we were there so they wouldn't fall on us. Okay, everything was worked out good. I mount my guys up on the tank. They're all clustered around the turret of this big tank. Bouncing Bettys, or anti-personnel mines as they are designed to explode by hitting a tether, and then they blow apart when they're stepped on or otherwise affected. So that, like a flower pot comes out and or a coffee can, that explodes. It's full filled with all kinds of junk in there, from the factory floor sweepings, nails, bolts, anything you can find, to do a damaging wound to a GI up around his testicles or his high thighs, where they would bleed a lot. And if you hit an artery, you bleed to death. And if he doesn't, he's badly wounded. And when you wound somebody when you're retreating, it's better than killing somebody, because when you wound somebody, you need 4 stretcher bearers at one point, or 2 stretcher bearers, an ambulance, a driver, a medic, field hospitals. You tie everybody up by taking somebody to the rear when you want to be moving forward. Okay, so that was a good way for them to fight, and we understood that. So, but when I mounted my guys up, I remember seeing a picture of the Russian going into combat that one. I said, what did they do that for? Don't they have other vehicles? They sure they do. But by putting them up by the turret, the anti-personnel mines explode against the treads up about 4 feet high maximum, you see. And therefore, our guys wouldn't be hurt by the anti-personnel mines. If they hit the tank tread, the chances are, and I've had experience by my guys telling me that, it blows out the tread, and very rarely does it penetrate the body of the tank. so that the tank may be immobilized, but at least, the guys are still in there, and if you're close enough, you can use it as a fixed firing position. And so I mount my guys off. We start off very early in the morning, just when dawn began to break. And we start to roll up the slope. About the first 100 meters or less, we hit the first anti-personnel mine. They explode, they bounce off the side of the vehicle, bum, 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 like the pinging and making. It causes no damage to any of our guys. It scares us a little bit, but my strategy is working up to this point. No anti-tank mines are hit. About 150 yards up, 150 meters up, this guy with the Bradley gun in his arm says to me, "I gotta get off. I don't feel good." The guy was chickening out. And he was a new guy to our platoon. He came from one of the Dakotas. I won't mention which one. I don't want to make him feel bad. But he was the guy who said when he came to it, "I want to kill all the goddamn Germans." He was going to be the knock him on the head type. And he was scared to death, quite obvious. So he said, "Let's go back." I said, "Well, you got it out of your mind. I'm not going back. You don't want to go forward?" He said, "No, I don't want to go forward." I said, "Get off the goddamn tank." We stopped the tank. I wrap on the hood. We stopped the tank. The driver, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing. The guy wants to get off." So he dropped him right off. I said, "Now you stand on the tank treads, but we just made the mark. We know there's no mines over there. If you want to, walk back all the way down, but follow those tank trail. Otherwise, you might get your ass blown off." And this guy was frozen stiff. We kept on moving another 50 yards. We turn around. Don't worry about it. We turn around. I look, and there's a guy. He's so frozen. He's still standing in place. Now we get to the. Fortunately, we're not hit by any anti-tank personnel, mines rather. The other ones are going off harmlessly beside us on both sides of the tank. We get to the first pillbox. Now, we had taken the location of the pillbox. We knew from aerial information how they were laid out, and I determined to take the one on the left flank, the one that which was nothing on its side other than the steep slope, and the only other protection it had was on its right side, so to speak. In which case, I only get fire from one side, if anything. So I take the first one. We move to that particular tank very slowly. I mean, that pillbox, bunker, whatever you want to call it. And I had previously educated the driver what we wanted to do, which was that he was to roll up to the edge of the lip of that saucer, and then see to it that he didn't expose very much of his underbelly, and drop his weapon down as low as he can get it, so that it would be aiming at the pillbox. I didn't expect him, even with an armor piercing, necessarily to pierce anything, but I think it would make a good impact on it when it hit. Secondly, I said the moment he does that, he should back off and move to his right a couple of meters and stay there and wait until I can signal him again. And if he came up again, they would think there was more than one tank there because it was another position. The moment that he was to do that, fire that first round, I would hop off of the tank into the position where he had just moved out his treads, so I knew there was nothing there, and crawl to the lip of that pillbox, that saucer lip, just raising my head high enough to see over the edge, and I would shout out to these guys in German to surrender, that they were surrounded, and that the first one that hit, I have to make this point, the Army said we don't have any anti-tank rounds with us, we only have anti-personnel. So, okay, I take what you got. The anti-personnel would not penetrate the concrete, but it would make a lot of concussion impact on the inside, on the outside, and they wouldn't know what kind of shell we were firing. So I crawled up to the edge. I remember I shot out at the top in German, surrender. I gave an order, surrender. I said, nothing happened. I crawled to another part because I could poke my head up there the same place. They may lay on me, and hit me. I crawled to another place, and meanwhile, I had my men come out, follow my track now, and they had grouped themselves, purposely having their weapons sticking up, but not their heads. So they see about 6 or 7 guys there, okay? I say, you're surrounded, and the next shell that's coming in is armor piercing. So you better surrender now, or else. There was no armor piercing. I gave them, I sent a few seconds after the second time that I shouted at them, and they could hear the roar of the engine starting up, that the tank was going to come up on the lip. There's an exhaust pipe comes out of these places, like a chimney. Air comes out like in the toilet we have, It comes up a stick, and on the end of the stick is a dirty, gray-looking, what must have been a white rag of some kind. And they wave it. They surrendered. I said, okay. So the guys, the moment that they did that, I said, okay, come on out, hin de hoog. I kept my guys still below. I wouldn't take a chance they're going to double cross us, The door opens very furtively. It was built up above grade. There's a number of steps to come down. I got to give this German guy credit. He came out, opened the door. I could have shot him, double crossed him, He comes out. He has his hands up in the air because he had no weapon in his hands. And he starts to work his way down the steps. I grab him and we frisk him. He doesn't have any weapons. I asked him in German, how many guys in there? You got 3 more guys in there, okay? I can figure it my 4, okay? Or maybe it was 5. One case it was 5. And this one happened to be a sergeant. There was 5. He was the number 1. And he had a side pistol, which I took and I kept as a souvenir. I took it home. They let me take it home, and I gave it to the guy with a gun collector later on. I don't have it now. It's a P45. I should have kept it, but I don't. Anyway, I frisked him, and the other guys come out, and I told them, okay, I'll walk down the slope, and, it's mine. They knew that, and just follow the tank tracks, which they did. And I called, at that point, the next shell that comes in there was one of our own. I hadn't had a chance yet to put the red marker out. Bang, and that shell hits real hard, and I'm crouching on the edge of the structure, and I had the red the thing, ran back, got the red thing, unrolled it, and laid it on the steps. Step like a staircase. It's a royalty, And I call over on my radio to headquarters, to my troop down below, the troop commander, squadron commander. I say, we took the pillbox. He said, I can't hear you, Katz. Too much noise. I said, your shell's falling overhead. Move your fire. Okay. He said, we got you. And there was a pause. He says, congratulations. And then there was another pause. He says, you did great. Go take the next one. I said, wait a minute. I said to myself, it was only one job, I did the job. Ended up, I spent the whole rest of the morning taking all the other pillboxes. The other guys saw these guys surrendering, and they were quite happy. They got one round fired at them. They surrendered. I captured 27 guys. Didn't lose a man except for this guy with the coward who walked away, but he wasn't lost, hurt. And we get down to the base of the hill. The last pillbox, a bunker, was way in the crest. And during the day, it had been taken over by the artillery that was using it as an outpost now. You got a beautiful view of the valley that we opened up for them. And I sacked out. I'm real tired and fatigued. And they told me, you'll go tomorrow morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. We'll take it to Paris. We got a Jeep going to take you to Paris. So put your ODs on. Put your dress ODs on. So I got rid of my fatigues, put on my dress uniform and a duffel bag, and lay down with a little plastic raincoat on because it was drizzling, and sacked out. I get waked up by my communications sergeant. He said, you took those pillboxes today? I said, yeah. He said, well, we got to string some wire between a couple of them because the artillery wants them for communication purposes. I said, fine. So let's walk up, make sure we stand on the tracks of where we walked, where the tank went. and I'm loaded, my arms are loaded with the sound and power wind-up telephones and wire, and his arms are the same. We get to the top of the thing. The Germans had built trenches between the pillboxes, but they built them in a very intelligent way from a military point of view. They built them as zigzags. So they were twice as long as they normally would be. The idea being, if it's a zigzag, if a shell falls into the trench, it hits a corner, it only kills those people or wounds them in that area. If it's a straight line, like a bowling ball, it knocks all the pins down. But he said to me, he says, "You want me to pay all that wire out in that trench? That's twice as much wire." I said, "That's right." He said, "Hey, Katz," he says, "Professor, what's the shortest distance between 2 points?" He was educating me. I said, "A straight line." He said, "That's right. And that's why we're going to go straight across this field, not in this goddamn crisscross trench." I said, "Okay, if you want to do that, I'll do it." I figured maybe, hey, come on. I said, "It's dangerous." He said, "Let's go. It's getting dark." So I go ahead and I step over the wire first, that perimeter. They had their barbed wire. And the Germans had told me they didn't mind their own perimeter, they only minded the perimeter after the barbed wire, obviously. And he steps over the wire, and I'm maybe about 6 feet away from him. He's behind me, and I got my arms loaded up, and he says to me, "Hey, maybe you're right." I said, "Yeah, okay, let's go back the way we came." Now, as I began to turn, just like that, with my arms loaded up, instantaneously, the biggest light in the world ever went off around me, and I feel I was being hit in my back, I felt, by a baseball bat and a red-hot poker at the same time, which I was told later on is the way a penetrating wound of that kind feels, okay? And the pain was transmitted to the small of my back. So I'm lying on the ground now, and I thought I had got hit in the back. And I remembered as a Boy Scout, so what your mind works, that you don't move anybody if you got a back injury until you know what it is, because you can break the guy's back and kill him, So this guy who wasn't hurt, he's 6 feet away from me, he's frozen in this spot. He says to me, "Are you hurt?" He reminded me of those cartoons I used to see where the guy goes down a flight of stairs and fall on the bottom, and the guy says, runs up, "Are you hurt?" You know what I mean? I said, "Sure, you son of a bitch, I'm hurt." He said, "You want any help?" I said, "Leave me alone." And then I realized, okay, it wasn't my back, because I felt something coming running down my right leg, some moisture. It was my blood. Anyway, we get up, we walk back, no one hit anymore. He had booby-trapped the mine. What he had said was he felt something cross his instep, and he said, "Watch out," or something like that. That alerted me to start to throw myself to the ground. And he had tripped the mine. He wasn't hurt at all. I took the full force, okay? In any event, we're now back at the same pillbox that I had taken earlier. Inside were 4 artillery officers playing cards at the table that was in the pillbox. And I stagger up the steps, getting kind of queasy at this point. And I get to the table where they're playing cards, and I bang my elbows down on the table, to support myself, because I'm really not feeling well. And he upset all their cards all over the place, and the money and all that kind of stuff. And I said, "Excuse me, sir, I'm only a enlisted man. I'm screwing up an officer's game." I said, "Excuse me, sir." I said, "But I've just been hit." So one of them looks up and says, "Oh, was that the noise we heard?" They didn't bother to come out and look. It'll be a counterattack next door, right in front of them, right? Anyway, to make a long story short, the medics finally come for me, cut up my beautiful OD so to get at the wound. And I look down, I'm wearing long john underwear, which, like I said earlier in my story, the British gave us long john underwear, we gave them battleships, and they gave us chocolate bars. Okay, it was a fair exchange. Their underwear was gray, ours was khaki. But my gray right leg was now soaked red from my blood. And the left one was still gray. And while I'm lying there, half dazed, I remember my public school 173 grade school graduation play where I played a court jester, in which my costume was, one leg was gray and one leg was red. See how the mind works, okay? So I remember I'm feeling a lot of pain, and I said to the medic, I'm dozing in and out now, "You gotta give me some morphine." I said, "I don't have a head wound." He said, where'd you learn that? Because when I got hurt the first time, I asked for morphine when I revived enough. He said, you can't give it you. You got a head wound. We don't know how bad it is. We can kill you with morphine if you have a head wound. You know, the brain could be affected. I said, I don't have a head wound. He said, well, you learned that. I said, I learned it the first time I was hurt. So they gave me that stuff. They put me on the stretcher, took me down the hill. The next time I remember, I told you the story, that I waked up in a place that was a plank floor, a blank plaster white wall in front of me. I'm lying on my back. I raise my head up slowly, and there, what do I see but a crucifix on a wall? I said, God, I'm dead. I'm in heaven. I didn't mind being dead. I didn't mind being in heaven. But they put me in the wrong place. I couldn't see myself in eternity being in a Christian heaven, you know, being a Jewish guy. So it bothered me. It turned out to be I was in a church that had been cleaned out of all of its pews and everything else as an evacuation center in Luxembourg. All they left on the wall was a crucifix to be a comforting sign for everybody else, and it didn't particularly bother me after I understood what it was. Then I remember, you read the part of my book, I'm in this place where we have this, let me see if I can maybe just read that particular part. On the train, hospital train, page 109. I'm on this hospital train being taken to Paris, and what's it? Hospital train was chapter 28. Okay. On the morning of the 21st of February 1945, I had expected to be on my way to Paris to go to officer candidate school to be trained as an infantry officer. Now, I was on my way to Paris, but not the way I intended. I was on my way to Paris, lying on my back in a hospital train, tied down in my bunk with railings on the side to keep me from rolling out, assuming I was able to move, being tied down as I was. And I was being given painkillers, so I was fading in and out. I remember on the opposite side of my bunk, there were bunks on both sides of the train with an aisle down the middle. There was a series of bunks. There was one above me, and I was the lower, and then there was a lower on the other side opposite me, and a bunk above that. And there was a young guy, younger than I was. In that time, I was only, in 1945, I was just 22, I believe, at that point. He must have been 18 or so. And everybody else in that car, aside from myself, apparently was asleep or moaning, but nobody was talking, nobody was joking. And this guy was talking a mile a minute. And he was telling about he's finished with the war, using all kind of profanity. They don't got me anymore. I'm going to be out of it. I got it made, all that kind of stuff. And I can see that he began to laugh hysterically. Boy, the army got finished with me. I got out of here. And I said, what's he knocking himself around like that? He seems to be almost hysterical. And he was kicking his feet around at that point, and he happened to move the blanket enough, and I noticed then, opposite me, he was lying, and I looked at the bottom of his leg, and it was all gone. He had lost his foot up past the ankle. It must have been blown off by one of those, what they call teller or plate mines. And he was talking about the fact that he was out of the service now, he had it made. But, this guy was concerned, obviously, that maybe he had been an athlete, he couldn't be an athlete anymore, he couldn't be a good dancer anymore, he couldn't make it with the girls anymore. And he was trying to get his courage up by talking the way he did. And I understood that, and I felt sad for him, and yet a little bit concerned for myself in a way, and I sort of reached down to make sure I still had all my leg together. They didn't take it apart when they gave me the operation or the initial part. I had all of it. So I recognized that my wound was a bad one. They told me later on, if it gone another centimeter deeper, it would have hit the artery, the femoral artery, and I probably would have bled to death before they got me off the hill. So that I was lucky, but I was being saved because as far as I was concerned, I was being led to my beautiful wife Annalisa Bauer. Now, talking about wounds, let me talk about the flip side of that. When I met my wife and I ultimately took her home in Germany before I went back to the States myself, because she was in the American zone when I met her, and she lived in the French zone. So, and this was in November of 45. I was going home to be discharged honorably, and her mother and her sister were waiting for me. Her father had been taken as a civilian by the French and was ultimately released. The Americans released him because there was nothing wrong with him, except that he was rounded up with a lot of other Germans by the French who were looking for war criminals, which was a proper thing to do, but they shouldn't release him when they found he wasn't one. Anyway, he never was a party member either, neither was anybody in the family. The only one who didn't come to the door to greet me was her younger brother, Kurt. Now, Kurt had been in the armored forces of Germany, drafted as a kid of 17 by Hitler when he was sweeping the sidewalks to find some more bodies to put into the army. And his column was strafed by American aircraft, and he did what we did when we were strafed by German aircraft. We couldn't fire back at these guys and hit them in any case, so we would jump out of the vehicle and run for the nearest depression or ditch or rock we can hide behind, because they were aiming at the vehicles. And that's what Kurt did. He jumped out of his vehicle, went into a nearby ditch, hunkered down. The American plane dropped its bombs. One of them missed the column completely and fell into the ditch right where Kurt was and blew his leg off, okay? His right foot off, up to the knee. Okay, fortunately his German surgeon saved it for him. Later on he was able to get an artificial limb. But he was sitting there at home when I came in, dressed in my ODs, ready to go home, all shiny. I'm taking his sister home, and here was this American guy coming in there, the victor, all dressed up and so forth, able to walk, to climb steps, to dance, to be with his sister, having, from far as he was concerned, fun and games with her, and which I wasn't, of course. That was not my desire or hers. And he was sorry for himself, and Annalisa tried to get him to talk to me, and he wouldn't talk to me, and we sat there in silence for a while. I recognized that we'd be yummy a big damper on our homecoming. I asked her to go into the kitchen and help her mother make lunch, and I sat there, and he was like the Sphinx. He wouldn't talk, wouldn't move. He was really sullen. And I looked around the room, and I happened to see on the shelf a box in German that said chess set. And I said to him in German, Spielst du Schach? Do you play chess? But after a long 10 seconds of silence, he finally said, yeah, yes. And then I said to him again, Willst du spielen? Do you want to play? Another 10 seconds of pause, and he finally said, yeah. I said, okay. And I got the chess set and laid it out on the table, and he was sitting in a chair some distance from the table, and he began to, and it wasn't a chair that had wheels on it or rockers, just a plain chair, and he began to very painfully to turn it around to get it close to the table. I made no effort to help him move that chair, because I knew if I did, I would doubly impose upon his sense of weakness. I remember when I was in the hospital and still in a non-ambulatory phase, if someone would come up and say, can I help you, soldier? It would make him feel twice as bad. So I didn't touch him, and he got himself into place. And I said, okay, we began to play, and I'm a lawyer litigator by profession. I go into games and contests to win. I'm not a very good chess player, but I was playing chess to win. And he beat me badly. He was a great chess player, I gotta say that. In 20 minutes, he had me schach. He had me schachmat, chessmate, the king is dead. The sheik is dead. And I can see him loosen up a little bit. And I said, willst du noch ein Spiel haben? He said, yeah, okay, another game. Began to play again. This time in 15 minutes, he wiped me off the board. At which point, Annalisa comes in, and she sees he's more relaxed. He's even smiling, he's talking. She said, what happened? I said, we had a couple of games, and Kurt won. And she kind of looked at me, did I throw these games? I don't know, er ist ein sehr begabter Spieler, he's a very gifted player, you know. So the point I'm making is that wounding is on both sides of the aisle, pain is on both sides of the aisle. Soldiers, he was thinking of me initially, he knew how soldiers were. If they can get around to a pretty girl and take advantage of her, you know, some of them were cruel enough to do that. Some of them, like myself, were decent human beings and a decent woman, and you don't do those things. But once he got to realize, I said in my story, this book, that had he been there when I first met Annalisa, when I first saw her, he would have recognized by the expression on my face that I wasn't in love with her, and that my desires were not anything but of the best. And this is my story. And I have a summation if you want me to read that. Can I go? Now, in summation, I'd like to read something I wrote this morning, matter of fact. Can I say that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And it sums up, I believe, in a page and a quarter, what we've been talking about, my motivation and so forth, and what the war meant to me as an individual and to my family and so forth. World War II was neither an interlude nor an interruption in my life. On the contrary, it was the vehicle which changed the course of my life, and for the better. During WW2, we had the draft, and I had a college student's deferment. I could have sat out the war, safe within the cloistered confines of Brooklyn College, but I knew what the victory of Hitler, Mussolini, and Tojo would mean to all of us in America, and especially to me and my Jewish brethren. So I gave up my student deferment, and at age 19 enlisted in the Army in November 1942, and in November 1945 I was honorably discharged, and I chose the Cavalry as my branch of service. I've never regretted the decision. World War II was not only a national military victory over the forces of evil, it was also a personal triumph for me. And at age 48, I wish I was 48, and at age 84, I'm still enjoying the fruits of that triumph. I have written a book now in its pre-publication phase entitled From the Embers Rising, with the subtitle, How WW2 and the Love of a Courageous, Beautiful German Girl Shaped Two Lives. The book describes how the war changed the course of my life, how its various episodes, some pleasant, others quite the contrary, led me to that part of southern Germany where I found my wife, Annalisa Bauer, that beautiful, courageous, intelligent German girl from the Black Forest. For 57 glorious years, Annalisa was the cornerstone of my life, my best friend, and the mother of our 5 wonderful children. Alas, she was taken from us on March 20th, 2002, here in this house, by Alzheimer's. I shall never recover from her loss. Thus, the war gave me Annalisa Bauer, but it also gave me the opportunity, through the GI Bill, to become a lawyer. It did so by providing for all my tuition costs so that I could attend New York University School of Law, one of America's top 5 law schools. Without the GI Bill, I would never have had the financial means to attend such a prime school. I was wounded twice and awarded the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star Medal. One of my wounds put me in a hospital for 7 weeks in Paris. I received treatment today for all my medical needs through the VA and at no cost to me. I could not afford privately to pay for the excellent medical services I received from the VA. Thus, World War II has in truth shaped my life at every level of my being. Now, every GI service is special. Mine is singular, I believe, in one respect. I served for 3 years in Europe under General Patton in combat, then in military government at the war's end. Then after the war, I served as a civilian in military government when I returned to Germany to bring my beloved Annalisa home to the States. Before we married, Annalisa, a Protestant, converted to Judaism. Our two families, the Bauer family and the Katz family, have in their own small, loving world helped bring about a happy conclusion to a horrible episode in the life of the German people. Thus it is clear that World War II was neither an interlude nor an interruption in my life. It shaped for the better my life and that of my beloved Annalisa Bauer. In From the Embers Rising, I spell out how our WW2 denazification program, in which I participated, helped restore democracy to Germany. Everything in this key issue, which we did right in Germany in 1942 to 1948, from 1945 to 1948, we've done wrong in Iraq. Apparently, those now in charge have not studied the past. As noted, those who don't learn from the past are doomed to relive it. Arthur Stanley, Katz, October 15, 2007. Thank you for the opportunity to record my message. You want some light now from here? Do you think it'd be better? How do you want me to begin?
However,
Okay.
okay.
I'm continuing this part of the interview to sum up the basic reasons why I joined the military government after the combat phases were over, and then returned to Germany as a civilian to work in military government to bring back my beloved Annalisa to America, but also to continue the program of restoring democracy to Germany. I had been through the crucible of war and seen its cruelties and been affected by them, but I was still very naive at the end of the war. I actually felt that with the war over, that the scourge of anti-Semitism would disappear, that hatreds of one national group against another would disappear. And of course, to my great surprise, I found that was not the case. And I'd like to illustrate that concept with two examples. One where it was one German against another German, and the other one was of a different nature. I'll tell first the one about German against German. In 1945, the war had ended as a practical matter in the last weeks of April, when I got out of the hospital and then joined military government with the permission of my cavalry group, who told me, my squadron, that there was no more fighting. We were rounding up people here and there and looking for Nazis, but they would allow me to go into military government. They thought it was important, and I went into military government, feeling that the purpose of the war was not just to win the war, but to win the peace, in this case, to bring democracy back to Germany. And I felt, as working in military government, speaking German, that I could make my small contribution that way. And of course, it led me to finding my greatest wonderful prize, which was getting to know and to have Annalisa Bauer become my wife. The story I'm relating now is that there were great food shortages in the 45-46 period in Germany, and to do that, we Americans were looking for food sources that would enable the Germans to get through the winter of 45 into 46. We had learned that the Bavarian farmers had a large amount of potatoes stashed away in their deep farm cellars. Heidenheim, the town I was in, the county I was in, was on the border of Bavaria in Württemberg, and which is west of Bavaria. And they sent me to buy some potatoes from this very wealthy German farmer who we understood had a great stash of these potatoes. When we approached him, he indicated to us he didn't have any potatoes. We knew better, and we went, of course, and searched his cellars, and we found the potatoes. And we said we would buy some. He refused to sell it to us, and we said, well, we'll take it, and we'll leave whatever we think is a fair amount of money. And he said, why are you taking my potatoes to feed your American army? Don't you have enough of your own food? And we said, no, we're not taking it to feed the American army. We're taking it to feed Germans. I said, what Germans are you feeding? I said, we're feeding the Württemberger. He says, those are not Germans. He was very angry. He said, the real Germans are the Bayer, the Bavarians. The Württemberger are not real Germans. And there's an example that at the end of the war, where both sides were in dire physical straits, that they would still be arguing who was a real German, and was the type of thing that depressed me. The other episode I will relate is one where in military government, one of the functions we had was to restore the physical well-being and the mental well-being of the Katz, the concentration camp, Häftlinge, the prisoners that were let out, that had survived Hitler's concentration camps. The bulk of them, of course, were at that point were Jews, and some were gypsies, and we also had some Russian soldiers still alive that the Germans had not gotten around to executing. And we had a Russian major with us to work for their repatriation. Instead, the Russian soldiers didn't really, a lot of them want to go back to Russia. They knew what the situation was. They'd rather remain in the West, but they went back in any case. With regard to the Jews, we fattened them up. We got them back with a proper caloric count. And then we had the question of how do we dress these people, because we want to send them back. There were no clothing factories working in Germany at that point. And some guy came up with a great idea. He said, why don't we take our dress ODs, the olive drab uniforms that we have, take off all the insignia of rank and origin, and dye it blue, another color, so we don't look like the GIs, and dress the people in that, and give them a knapsack filled with food to last about a week or so before we send them back on their trek to Poland and Romania and Bulgaria and the Ukraine and Russia, and dry milk and things of that nature, and bread. And we thought it was a great idea, and we did that. And we sent off the first group, must have been at least 500. And this was sometime in, I would guess it probably was in July of 1945. And we were very happy we had succeeded in rehabilitating these people. They were happy to go back. They were excited to go back. They were excited to be alive. And we sent them back. They had to go through the Russian zone, which was east of us, before they got into their own countries. The Russian zone of Germany, I mean occupied Germany. And on the way there, a number of adventures occurred, which were very unhappy to them and to us. Within about a week or so, they began to straggle back. Their clothes ripped off their backs, their knapsacks with food stolen. Some of the women had been raped. All of them had been set upon, robbed by the Russian soldiers on the way through the Russian zone. And those who had survived that experience, when they got to Poland, they were set upon by the local Polish population that could not bear, apparently, the sight, anti-Semitism flaring again, of Jews who were obviously better fed than they were, better clothed than they were. And they set upon them, human nature, direst being what it is, and took back what they thought belonged to them and sent those poor people back to us. I was so upset by that happening, all the work we had done, my buddies and I, and our officers, to rehabilitate these people, that it affected me almost as much physically as having been wounded. And that evening, seeing Annalisa in the evening, I recounted to her the episode that I'm just talking about. And she, of course, was aware of that because she had, in running our kitchen facilities as the chef, was preparing the food products that we sent along. And I remember she saw how depressed I was. She said to me, she took me in her arms and she said to me, Bulge, that was a nickname she gave me. She says, she spoke to me in German at that point, but I will give you that more or less the English. She said, don't be sad. She said, you and your comrades are doing wonderful things for the establishment of peace, but one cannot in a short time improve a totally broken world. She said, I know how courageous you and your buddies are and how sensitive you are, and it hurts you when you see how hateful many other people are. She says, but keep up your courage. And I only wish you to be with me for a long and loving life. So don't give up. And I didn't give up. And at that point, I remember I was so upset, I began to cry, and she kissed me, and her embrace and love restored my sanity. This is the type of an experience that lingers in my memory as much as the negative things, because the war was a good war in the sense of wars being evil. And in this case, it was a good war. It restored the democracy, helped restore democracy to Germany through its denazification program. We got rid of the baddies and brought back a viable Germany that exists today. And I'm most grateful to my government, my country, the land of my birth, that gave me the opportunity to serve and to recount my little part in that great saga. And that's my story. Thank you so very much.